Wow, it's great to reflect on our past performances here in Sindaw. So, Vivian, do you think it's too late for people to join us? Because we're in a pandemic, so I'm not sure. Oh,
No,
Vivian, there you go.
sorry. No, not at all. And definitely with this pandemic, it's not stopping us from doing, what we normally do, which is dancing and teaching the indigenous culture.
You're right. You know what? You have a really good point. Let's tell our viewers at home what's like to be part of Sindaw and what it is.
So Kindingson Dao is an organization that exists to assert, preserve, reclaim, and recreate the traditions of dance, music, martial arts, storytelling, and orature of the indigenous peoples of Mindanao, which is part of the Southern Philippines.
We're sharing these art forms to deepen the social consciousness of the issues that affect Indigenous peoples in Mindanao. And we're hoping to inspire the youth to get involved in our work and, really take in this culture.
And more recently, we did have a production before pandemic in March at La Mama Experimental Theater Club, which we are live streaming on now. We also dance with Queensboro Dance Festival, and we are currently trying to live stream more recitals on YouTube and Facebook.
That's right. And we're still hosting these dance classes on weekends. So Saturdays at 12 New York time and Sundays at 6 p.m. New York time as well. They're free to join. You don't need any previous experience. And the best thing is we're very inclusive. We open our arms to the world. So you don't even have to be Filipino to join us.
So what are you waiting for? I hope you can join us. We'll have more information for you to join all that at the end. So stick around for the rest. Before we do start, I do want to go through the program flow for tonight. So as mentioned, hi, my name is, or maybe I did mention it, but hi, my name is Vivian. I'm one of the moderators for tonight. And my co-host, Jerome, if you want to speak a little bit to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, folks. My name is Jerome. You can also call me JJ, and I'm one of the other co-hosts for the Rinayung series of Kinting Sinda.
Um, Oops, okay. So we're going to go over a little bit more about Kinding Sindaw, the founder, more of the mission statement, also some of the funders. We will have one of our lovely speakers help us with the land acknowledgement. And then we'll go over some guidelines. And then after that, we'll have two speakers for tonight. And then we'll close the night with questions and announcements.
All right. So I just want to give a quick shout out to our funders in Kinting Sindao. So first and foremost, we have the Louisa Nicholas Lewis and Reginald F. Lewis Foundation. We have La Mama Experimental Theater Club, which is on the Lower East Side, right by NYU. We've been resident artists there for a very, very long time. Also, Lotus Music and Dance. They're one of our long-standing supporters in the community since we started out way, way back when. Without them, we wouldn't have, so much of a, how I put this, repertoire and reputation. And they've been, again, one of our long-standing supporters. So all of this would not be possible without people like Lotus Music and Dance. There's also New York City Council, the Howard Gilman Foundation, the New York City DCA, or Department of Cultural Affairs, NIFA, which is the New York Foundation for the Arts, Dance NYC, and Kidney Care of the Treasure Coast.
And then I'll turn this over now to our funder, Potri, to talk a little bit about tonight. Potri, you'll have to unmute from Noni's.
Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Because tonight is a La Mama production. La Mama is a 60-year-old theater that adopted Kining Sindaw as a resident since 2000. So tonight, we are a La Mama production, and join us always. Every 2 weeks, we have Rinayung, and we come out with different features. Tonight, stay where you are, have some water with you and maybe a popcorn. but you are going to travel with us together with the two indigenous people from the USA, and one is a Maranao, the people of the lake from the Philippines where I came from. So, Salamu Alaikum, and stand by, join us. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to write it in the chat room or hold on to it. You can ask questions at the end of the discussion with our two from, and you'll get answers from our two speakers. And for those who are online, please chat your questions and we will take care and hopefully we'll answer. Thank you.
Now I would like to turn it over to Carolyn to help us with land acknowledgement. Thank you.
You're welcome. What I want to do this evening is sing a gathering song and to also acknowledge that we are all in different places. I come to you from the Kickapoo Nation in Indian Territory, also known as Oklahoma, and to recognize the original inhabitants of this land base, which is Indian Territory, the Kickapoos, Quapaws, and Kiowas, who were the original stewards of this land. Other tribes live here now, as we all know. And I also want to acknowledge the Lenni Lenape in New York, where some of you are situated, as well as the many other indigenous nations that call New York home and that also call Oklahoma home, and the indigenous nations that are around us. Land acknowledgement just isn't about acknowledging the people who on whose land we reside. It is also about supporting one another as communities. It's also about understanding and recognizing our shared histories. And it's also about understanding that this is Indigenous land that we are all on, and to recognize and to partner with Indigenous peoples in the world to be able to acknowledge that cultural practice is still alive and moving today. So I'd like to sing a gathering song. The words are Choctaw. Some of you may know this song. And it means the Pia Mishmiki Oglahita, look at all the beautiful people dancing.
Thank you so much for that. We will see her later on in the night as well, so she's not going anywhere. But before we do get into that, I wanted to go through some guidelines. So for those who are in the Zoom call with us, and for those who are watching us on Facebook via Kinding Sindaw or La Mama, just a note that this event is recorded and it is live streamed on those two platforms. We do also want to have a disclaimer that some of the topics that are mentioned today, or even in any of our Rinayung events, might hit home for some people. And we're in no way, shape, or form trying to make discomfort for anyone. It's just that the nature of the topic sometimes can bring out those kind of emotions. And we just want to make it aware that if you do feel any kind of discomfort while we are speaking, or while any of the speakers are saying any of their topics, feel free to either side chat me or Jerome, or poetry in the chat, or even just leave us a message or comment on Facebook letting us know. We would like to address it and make sure that we do have improvements on this in the future. And in regards to that, if you're wondering about anything, or if you even want to make a comment about anything, feel free to leave it in the comment section as well. If there are questions, we will like to bring it up in the Q&A part later on tonight, if you are comfortable having us mentioning it there. So that is just some guidelines for the event today. And I'll turn it over to Jerome to introduce our first speaker.
All right, thank you so much, Viv, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. So I would like to bring up our first speaker, Nasser Sharif. So Nasser Sharif hails from Mindanao, Philippines. He is a Metanao, just like our very own poetry, which is one of the indigenous peoples of the Philippines as well. Fun fact, he's actually a CPA, so he does have an accounting background. He also has quite a diverse resume. I'll share a couple highlights from there. So he actually, in addition to being a CPA or certified public accountant, he is actually a genealogist in Southeast Asia. He's well traveled. He's a paleographer, a screenwriter, and he also has experience in multimedia arts and digital graphics. And tonight, what he's going to be talking about is how can we relate genealogy to, Landis life? How can we relate it to the history of our people and make it relevant in today's society? So without further ado, I give you Nasser Sharif.
Yes, Assalamualaikum. I'll be doing a presentation, but I'm using actually what's this computer, because the my laptop doesn't have any video audio, so I'm using a laptop. Are you hearing me? Excuse me.
Yes, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Yeah. Okay, you're hearing me, and you're looking at my face. Is it moving now? I just had to check.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it does. Now I'll try to what's this? Share this screen from my desktop while I'm talking in my laptop, in the laptop which I borrowed, because my laptop actually the battery busted, and I cannot fix it for now. So let me try this. Yeah. Now, are you seeing my the screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So far, so good. So let us start now. You're hearing my voice, and you're seeing something on the screen. Thank you very much. Bismillah. Um, I became interested in genealogy way back in 2020, 2015, something like that. I usually I was not interested before, way back, you know, before even in college I was not interested in culture or anything else. For your information, I'm a CPA, and uh, I don't know. Maybe it's because I have mellowed this time that I am doing now historical and cultural representations. So uh, here is the next slide. Um, Genealogy is always fascinating us. Everybody wanted how are you related to your ancestors, but many Filipinos now do not know. My experience is that a lot of people cannot go beyond their great grandfather. While our identity may change the way we see ourselves for the better. Sometimes finding your genealogy, your what's this, uh, the parents, everything about your family could be disappointing sometimes. And this happened to Oprah Winfrey when he has her fantasy about the supposed origin with the Zulu warriors in Africa. And even Dr. Jose Rizal, in a rare fit of rage, challenged Wenceslao Ritana when Ritana tried to poo-poo his ancestry in his writings. In the Philippines, there has been a problem because in 1849, during the second half of the 19th century, Governor Claveria made an edict which changed a lot of the surnames of the people, and this create a lot of trouble when we are trying to study genealogy in general. It becomes very very difficult because it is very very hard. Now. Most of the Filipinos, the bulk of the Filipinos, real under the impression that just because we have Spanish-sounding surnames, we could already claim that our great ancestor were hailing from Europe. So a naive few of us just scour the web pages and then grab the clan's coat of arms supposed to be and cut at their web pages. Um, Historically we have a disconnect in Asia because despite the internet age, historically we are not attuned to what is going on in Southeast Asia, for example. But as the ASEAN is coming under one roof, we need to show our cultural hand. Who are we as a people? The current trending now is what they call country branding. It's not just about product branding, but you have to identify the product with a certain culture. Can we extricate ourselves from this predicament? This is my subject, why genealogy matters in history. Um, uh, in terms of history, we are always a blind spot in reckoning the genealogy of Southeast Asia because the reason is that we don't have much literature like the Hikayat, something like the Tofat al-Nafis, which is in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Burma, something like that. We don't have much literature to go by, but so this has become our problem. And we are trying to find a solution to this one. But so far, um, in my survey, in my study, we are not doing, I think, the right thing. There is a growing myth that if we just unearth an archaeological find like the stupa in Borobudur, we could find our place in history. But so far now, it doesn't happen. We have so many, we have built more than enough archaeological finds to get us by. Why are we still waiting for the others should fall? I mean, we need some textual narratives. I have read many books on these finds, including those finds, the Great Mother Boot in Butuan, some ceramics, and a lot of excavation done in Minduro and in the southern Tagalog. But our problem now is that most of these books are making some technical explanations. They cannot go beyond that. Well, what is the cultural implications? How do we connect this to the history of Southeast Asia? This has been our problem. And this New Testament to our past bigs for what we call the Kirim of the Iranon to uncover their character in all their gore and glory. Because it is the textual narrative that provides the motion. In Butuan and its surrounding, the discovery of the ancient artifacts that relate to the Indian civilization speaks for the textual narrative. Oh, excuse me. When I say Indian, I'm not talking about American Indian. The story about this is that when uh, the Spanish discoverer, the Portuguese rather, who discovered America, Christopher Columbus found America. He thought that he find the India, what we call India now. That's why they are called Indians after the American Indians. Um, now, we can marvel at the artistry of these archaeological finds, but we are still digging for the textual evidence. That's our problem. We cannot give it some movement, some dynamics. It became a static. For instance, if what's this? These wares, these ceramics, these gold bracelets, these Indian idols that we find in Butuan and other environs in the Philippines. This is still our problem. Um, Now, as a member of the Knights of Rizal, I have to plug this in because Dr. Jose Rizal has been working so hard to unearth our history. In fact, he went to London in 1888. He spent a couple of months there trying to find some old books. He did not find them, but I think in our age, it is time that we may be able to find our real ancestry with our research. Okay, there is a book, the Tuhfat al-Nafis, which has been translated by Virginia Matheson and Barbara Watson and in 1982. This is a very, very important book. Not only because it is not only for Indonesia, Malaysia, and the rest of the Southeast Asians, but especially for the Philippines. And this has not been I don't see anybody discussing about this. But the Culture Association of Sabah, they made a field work in Tanjung Pinang to find the fate of the 900 Iranos. In those days in Tampasok, during the 17th to 18th century, after the volcanic explosion of the Makatoring in 1735, a lot of Maranaos and Iranos migrated to other parts of the Nusantara. When I say Nusantara, I mean the Southeast Asian archipelago. They went even as far as uh, Madagascar. That is off the coast of South Africa, at the mouth of the Red Sea. And then I've even heard from the people in Sabah that there are some Iranos living actually a long, long time since the 18th century rather, in Australia, in some parts of Australia. And this one big investigation. So far, the Philippines is not joining this. It's only the initiative, the Sabah Commission. Um, and this book, the Tuhfat al-Nafis, is written in Bugis. It is written in Bugis and it was translated by those two ladies, Matheson and Barbara Andaya. What is so um, uh, what is so fascinating about this is it talk about a certain letter sent by the Sultan of Johor to the Sultan of Tampasok, who is an Iranon, to help him dislodge the that's in Riau, Linga, south of Johor. Um, and this is what happens after this emissary came to Timpasok. The Sultan of Timpasok uh, uh, asked his son, the Sultan of Tabuk, to get some reinforcement from the Iranians in Mindanao. So he went to Mindanao, uh, he went to Tabuk, and those people who what's this answered the call, went to Tampasog. They converged in Tampasog and from Tampasog they sailed to Rio Linga and then battled it out with the Dutch. And they were successful. The king was very grateful. Many Iranos actually live now in Riau. I think they are close to, somebody told me, Maranao himself who has been there, it's close to 2 million people. And this is a fascinating thing. Why are we not discussing this? This is my advocacy. That's why I am doing this researches. One of those who went there is Tengku Besar sa Wato, Mitumag. This is from our place in Wato. This is Mitumag. And he's known as Tengku Besar. The Tengku Besar that he got is actually a title, which means heir apparent in Riau Lingga, Indonesia. And I use his genealogy to crown one sultan, Sultan Dimbasangay. That's uh, Kabili Jr. Kabili Jr. He's the son of the late Senator Kabili. And Senator Kabili was popular when he didn't sign the 1935 Constitution because he thought that it is very unfair for the Muslim population of the Philippines. He was not the only one who signed, he was the only one who signed, who did not sign the Philippine Constitution in 1935. Um, uh, Now, let me give you a very, very concrete ancient example why we need genealogy. This is a lineage in the Salsila. It talks about Sarandrang. Sarandrang is um, have lived in this early part of the 16th century. We are interested in this because Sarandrang means Sailindra, a Sanskrit combined words which means king of the mountain. It is often used as an epithet of the Hindu god Shiva. Thus, Dato sa Palau, which is the Iranon word for it, is actually a calque of the Sri Vijayan title Sa Ilindra. Now let's see how it is going to enlighten, illuminate those finds in Putuan. We will see in a very short while. Um, we have tons of data sa Palau in our Irano Celsius. So what is the significance of the Salindra dynasty? How are we connected to it? Here it is. The Salindra dynasty of the 8th century were responsible for the construction of great monuments in Java, including the colossal Borobudur in 750 AD. It is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. When you have the time, if you can visit that, you will see how magnificent it is. And the Sailendra dynasty ruled a vast swath of maritime Southeast Asia, and they both ruled Srivijaya and the Midang Kingdom in central Java. Now, I want you to take note about the Midang because it will relate to a very, very spectacular find in Laguna. Here it is. The earliest dated inscription in Indonesia, which clearly mentioned the dynastic name Salindra, commemorates the establishment of the Buddhist shrine Kandi Kalyan, dedicated to the goddess Tara. Take note of the word of the name Tara. The Salindra rulers maintained marriage alliances with Srivijaya, which is in Sumatra. As an example, for instance, Samaragrawira married Dewi Tara, a daughter of the Srivijayan Maharaja the Maharaj. So, now, how is it any related to us? If you scour the libraries, even the internet, you will find it. Believe me, that's my experience. But quite a number of Iranian princes were named after the goddess Tara over the century. We have Tara Sawato, the daughter of Ngor, circa 1630, 1610. Putri Tara sa Mumungan. Putri Tara sa Mumungan is from where the Neri family in Cagayan de Oro hailed from. They are descended. This is an ancestor of these people. And then Diwata Tara sa Taluan. And this is along the coast of the Iliana Bay, and a few others. This is the actual golden Tara found in Abusan, the spectacular find so far made, and it is now in Chicago. I think it is there in the United States. There has been a move by Senator Pimentel to have this uh, statue returned to the Philippines, but it was refused by the United States. But the United States hinted that if it is on a presidential level, they might return this statue. And this one, the Tara found in Agusan, is the archaeological bridge between the migrant population of Western Mindanao and Sulu from the lost civilization of Bambaran. This is Bambaran is where we find in the Darangan. That is the literature of the Iranon. Here is another personality from the Salsila, Maradia Gibunan of Bambaran, who came from Kabalbaran. That's Kabumbaran, and which is now called Kabadbaran. And then we have Butuan and Kalinan, circa 1296. He also hailed from Butuan. He is one of the four brothers who survived the Holocaust that ended their kingdom and founded the territories around the lake. And then we have Lalawan and Sasulog from Baclayan, who was the matriarch of the Tausug, and then his brother Dato Kilatan sa Baclayan also ruled Sulug. Now, ask any historian, you know, in history books, it is told that the people in Sulu came from Banjarmasin and from Butuan and from Baclayan. Now we know what is Banjarmasin. Banjarmasin is the southwest part of Kalimantan, but and we know also Butuan, which is in the northeastern part of Mindanao. But where is Baclayan? Ask any historian, he will not be able to tell you unless you know the Darangan, unless you know the Salsila. And Baclayan, for your information, and this is um, um, my research is actually from Southern Tagalog. This is Mindoro and Batangas. Now, the Salsila and is not only a source of history, it is also source of Iranian, the Sanskrit words. Let's see. Okay. Here is another big find. The Laguna copper plate inscription, which was discovered in, I think it was discovered something in 1987. It is a 900 during the Christian era, written during the Christian era. In the year 900, it is in Old Malay language using Old Javanese scripts, which we call Kawi. And below this is the Old Javanese charter digging in Palubaharan. This is in Indonesia. You see the similarities of this one with the one discovered in Laguna. The Bye-bye language, I think you've heard about this if you are reading a little bit of history, has its provenance from the Japanese Kawi script. The discovery of the LCI, the Laguna Copper Plate inscription in 1987, upset a lot of convention in Philippine historiography. It sits back our history farther back in time. It altered our perception of who we are as a people. This is an actual transliteration of the copper plate. Now, two Dutch expert, Anton Posma from the Philippine side and Johan de Caspares from the Indonesian side. They made a team to interpret what is contained in the inscription, and it is about a pardon by the chief of Tondo to a man named Namuaran. His death was this pardon, and after being pardoned, he was no longer in slavery. The plate mentioned a few towns, Luzon and Diwata, which is a town near Butuan, where many artifacts have been discovered. And if you if you are if you have been attentive in the previous frames, you will note that the Midang Kingdom in Indonesia was named as well. And this is the Silindra clan, which I have already discussed before. Um, this Midang Kingdom, more noteworthy is the subject of the inscription, which is Namwaran, whose deed has been forgiven. Now, if you look over in any genealogy all over the Philippines, you won't find any the name Namwaran, um, let alone in the Catalogo de Alphabeticos. But this is found actually in the Salsila. The rendition actually is Namaron or Namron. You will find this in the whether this Namron mentioned in the Salsila is the Namron that has been mentioned in the copper plate or its descendants. We do not know, but so far, this is what I have discovered. Um, let's see the next friend. The right now the salsila that we're having is written in Kirim. What I mean by Kirim is actually a Jawi script. It is actually a modified Arabic script. But in its ancient provenance, the Kirim was written actually in the Kawi. This is the this is a different form of writing. It is a sort of a writing adapted from the Indian system of writing. But uh, when Islam came to Mindanao, the Iranon migrated from the Kawi to the Jawi writing. But still, the name Kirim is stuck, We still call it the Kirim, although it is the Jawi script. And the reason for that is that the Sufi, these panditas, these religious scholars, dominated the royal courts of Maguindanao and Sulu, especially now. But the Iranians still call it the Kirim. On the lower right, you will see I have marked some of the actual name. We have Marhum Basar, Marhum Jaman, Marhum Sharif Adel. And there is a note on Marhum Sharif Adel, which is that it is Dambawada, meaning it has no offspring. So you will see here how meticulous the Kirim Salsila are. And below it is the Sultan's and Semporna. Um, let's go from Gugudan to Salsila. It may come as a surprise, but contrary to what many believe, the Arabic term for genealogy is not Salsila. The word actually is Ilmul Ansab. Salsila actually is a spiritual chain that transfers the knowledge from a spiritual student from the teacher to the student and then to successive students, something like that. So it is not actually a bloodline genealogy, as we believe. But because these Sophies, these panditas take care of the literature and the genealogical lineage of his patron, usually the Sultan. Over time, the word salsida had come to mean and equated with genealogy. That's what happened. The gradual migration from Kawi to Kirim, Jawi did not one way disturb the Sanskrit tantric character of the literature to the Iranon. Islam was absorbed, but it was actually only layered over the old belief. That's why the Bayo singers have broadened their repertoire. They include the kisas, the hikayat, tudol, etc., etc. Coinciding with the struggle against the colonialists, the Samania, this is a Sophie Tarika, become very popular with the warrior class. They had a penchant for compiling literature about heroism to inspire the rank of Iranian warriors and worked them into a frenzy before every battle. Every padao, that's the boat, is assigned a Kazis who leads the chant to inspire the main, and every fleet had its own Saman who oversees the spiritual nourishment of the band of warriors. The Iranian language in its pristine form is dominated by Sanskrit, and its early literature is based on the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. However, even though the Gugudan have migrated into the South Side, it is still a good source for the Sanskrit words. The Sanskrit words are written. Here are a few of them I have compiled for this presentation to do my poem. Now, these words I have carefully chosen because it does not exist in other languages in the Philippines. I'll just walk you over very fast because I don't want to be short in my time. The first word is Tupaan, which means hurricane. Amaluya Tupaan, who lives in 1541. Sarikala means chain. Akas, which means space. Adipati, which means overlord. Like Adipati Raja Bungso of Sulu. Bidur is an Irano name for girls. It means opal. Batara, well, this is also known in Tagalog as Bathala, noble, lord, or venerable. And then we have Budiman, which means intelligence, wise, Midadari, Pornaman, which is Pornima, full moon, Artawan, Kawaza, Vasa, Labo, Labugandang, that's word, Kalabas, and many, many others you will see here. I won't bore you with all this detail, but actually to me, this is very, very exciting. I'll just give you one name here, Normala, which means pure virgin. And in Sanskrit, it means Nirmala, free from dirt or impurities, clear, pure, and solid. And also Kasumba, which is a safflower, Kartamos, and then Parmata, which means excellent. This is actually used as a suffix for the name of the latest. Let's get into the next. So how many Sanskrit words are there in the Philippines? According to the linguist, there are about 300 words and 80% of which are in Tagalog and the rest is distributed all the rest of the dialects in the Philippines. Now, if you notice here in the upper right, uh, I think it was just 2 months ago, I made a collection. I have my own collection of Iranian words in Sanskrit. It's already 219 and it's nearing the 300 marks. So who are these people who has been researching? I think that's a baloney. They are not telling the truth. And my complaint, and this is the very reason why I am researching Iranian language and history and its culture. It's that we are always a blind spot in Philippine historiography. They do not discuss about us. I mean, I don't know whether it is out of jealousy or not. I don't know. Maybe the greater part of the Filipinos will be able to determine if there is a historian um, hearing my speaking today. Maybe he wanted to take that up. So as you see, I have already a 219 collection and I'm still counting. Oh,
We're going to have a part two of your lecture. And
Pardon?
because we're going over time and La Mama may take our time from our
Okay,
our
okay, okay.
so we
Yeah.
will we are going
Actually, I'm already winding up.
Oh, okay.
okay, okay,
You don't mind 1 minute?
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Mm. Here is me at work with my fellow Jason Mohammed Cristobal. It is always fraught with gender, because of there are many rebels in the South, country folks who think we are usurping their heirlooms, and the newfangled Olamas who believe we are promoting the writings of the devil. This is our best find for 2018 when we did our research. This one, the marquee here, this is in gold, and this is in the 18th century. You will not find this. And so far, I hope this one will be deposited in a museum one day when we put up the Iranian museum. Maybe Putri Rangkamanis wanted to put up the museum herself. So this is it. Thank you very much for your time, for hearing me. I have a lot of things. I can speak all day. I can spend 24 hours talking about this, and I have a lot of things to rebuild. But so far, this is much as I can squeeze in this presentation. In fact, I have a lot of things to discuss, and then I just abbreviated it for the purpose of my presentation with you guys. And thank you for having me. The so now it works. The sound, two laptops, two PCs. This is the last minute adjustments, and a while ago, just 30 minutes ago, I was in panic. Thank you,
No, it's
ladies and
okay.
gentlemen.
We
Thank
are
you very
Thank
going
you
much.
so
to bring
much.
you. We're going
Yeah,
to bring you back, Kaka. We're going to bring you back. So that's just the beginning.
Mhm.
Okay,
yeah,
so you
yeah.
will have a
Thank you
part
very
two
much.
eventually. Assalamualaikum. Don't
Alaikum
leave
salam.
because
I'm
there will be
done.
questions. Don't leave because we will bring you your audience that will ask questions.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. Definitely had a lot of history and information from that presentation, especially not an aspect that I've really researched into with Kining Sindaw. But I do want to introduce our next speaker. Carolyn Dunn is a poet, playwright, and scholar who was born in Southern California, and she is of Cherokee, Muscogee, Creek, Seminole, Cajun, French Creole, and Tunica Biloxi descent. Her scholarly work focuses on American Indian women's literature and American Indian identity. She has taught at Humboldt State University, Four Winds Indian School, and California Polytech State University. She will be speaking about survivance, a little bit about socioeconomic and how the indigenous people are viewing those kind of themes. I believe the spotlight is on you, so whenever you're ready to speak, go ahead.
Oh, okay, Vivian, thank you.
Mhm.
I know that we're going over a little bit, so I'll try to get through everything. But thank you again for having me. This is the second time that Poetry has invited me to participate in these events, and I'm very honored to be able to do that. So thank you, all of you, um, for for inviting me to be part of these events. A couple weeks ago, I was on and talked a little bit about the concept of survivance as imagined by the Ojibwe scholar Gerald Wiesner. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about tonight was kind of make those further connections between survivance and sovereignty and the concept of peoplehood, and especially as that relates to indigeneity in the United States. Speaking very broadly. Something that was very interesting to me about, and maybe that could be a question that we can ask and talk with Nasser later, is the idea that the part of the world, one of the parts of the world where my ancestors come from, is now known as Louisiana. And as Vivian mentioned, that is my, where my part of my indigenous roots come from in this part of the world. And and when you look at and when you look at Cajun French or Creole French or the Creole language, as it has evolved in Louisiana, it's a combination of French, West African, Ghanaian words, and Choctaw words from Louisiana. So so in looking at it, kind of looking at the Creole language of itself is very similar in that it is a mix of words from of the confluence of those peoples coming together. And so Nasser, I wanted to tell you that because I think that reminded me a little bit of when you were talking about the Sanskrit words and how they've been incorporated and the similarities. I was like, oh yeah, we have that too with European, African, and indigenous languages. So anyway, I wanted to throw that out there and say, make that connection. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit more during the Q&A. But I am a terrible I can't do PowerPoint to save my life. So I just end up talking a lot or singing or doing something. And so I don't have any beautiful slides to look at like Nasser's, but I just want to share something that I've been researching, and it's going to be probably a first chapter in a book that I'm writing on indigenous rhetorics, especially as indigenous rhetorics in the United States, especially as it applies to performance and performativity. So I'll be talking about a couple concepts, and this is the very beginning of me trying to collect my thoughts together. And so making the connections between survivance, indigenous sovereignty, peoplehood, and something that I had talked about a little bit the last time I was with you all was making those connections between performance and especially ceremonial performance and performativity, and making those connections again for an indigenous audience, for the indigenous world. So I'll be tying some of those concepts together. Tying some of those concepts together this evening, and then just sharing with you. This is something that's kind of hot off the press and that I've been working on for, during the pandemic. I'm supposed to be writing, and all I want to do is make earrings, So I got to get back to writing. I was telling poetry before we started tonight. I've got about, what do we say, poetry? About 60 student plays that I have to read and get up graded in this week. So I don't think I'll be going back to my academic writing at all. And I think that over the course of the pandemic, I have written, I finished this piece before the pandemic started. And then I wrote a poem, and then I wrote maybe one full page of a new play. So I need to motivate myself a little better to get to work. It's hard, it's hard when you're at home and you're in your comfort zone and all that good stuff. But anyway, so this I'll be talking a little bit and reading to you and talking a little bit with you this evening, just because I want to make sure I get everything in that I want to talk about tonight. And the working title of this particular chapter in the book is called "Performance of Peoplehood: Sovereign Rhetorics, Ceremonial Performativity, and Tribal Historiography in Indigenous Theater and Performance." Ooh, that's a mouthful, but we academics have to, give very long titles to talk about what we're talking about, to make sure that you can just look at the title and know what you're going to be reading. But I'm going to go ahead and get started with a quote from the Choctaw poet, playwright, Professor Leanne Howe. "This is what I like to think of as tribalography. American Indian playwrights, actors, and storytellers create from the experiences of our peoples and of ourselves. In that sense, our work belongs to the ancestors, ourselves, and to the next 7 generations." And that was a quote from an interview with Leanne Howe in a book called Performing Communities by Anne Kilkelly. And I've used, when I teach community theater, community-based theater, I've used that text quite a bit. And was glad to see that Leanne was referenced in that particular text. So in her essay, Tribalography, The Power of Native Stories, the Choctaw novelist and playwright, Leanne Howe argues that America was built by the power of Native American stories. Using the power of story and what she calls tribalography, that is the story that connects Native peoples to our ancestors, our descendants, and our landscape. America was created out of a story that was rooted in the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois condolence ceremony. Part of the ceremony incorporates the Great Law of Peace, or what Howe calls, quote, the oral drama that is recited by 7 elders and is, quote, designed to heal the community as a whole. The Law of Peace was brought to the Iroquois by Daganoweda, the peacemaker, and spoken for him by Iowanta, who was mourning the loss of his family. So not only was the Law of Peace brought to the Iroquois by Daganoweda, Howe argues, but it was brought to Iowanta to heal Iowanta's own losses by reciting the words of great comfort, which is that condolence ceremony. To speak these words is to give them power and breath. Iowanta's spirit was healed because of the power and the actual speaking and the orality of these particular words of this condolence ceremony. His loss was not forgotten, which is important, but his spirit was soothed. Together, this ceremony, and through this ceremony, the 2 men forged a confederacy that would serve as the basis for the inspiration behind forming the United States. And by telling this story in her interview in the book Performing Communities, Howe asserts that tribalography not only connects Native peoples to our own histories, but that we created the history of the United States, warts and all. And the good news for Native peoples is that this story is not over yet. It serves the function of tribalography, which is the living, breathing story, including a sense of place and connection to the world around us, and that Native peoples have exhibited in story making, story weaving, and creation since time immemorial. Stories have no endings. The Laguna writer Leslie Marmon Silko wrote in her collection Storyteller, quote, old stories and new stories are essential. They tell us who we are. They teach us how to survive. Now, the communal experience of the tribal reality is at the core of what compromises an essential connection to the tribal worldview. Storytellers reference the tribal aesthetic, and modern literary writers tapping into the traditional story are referencing ages of experience and indigenous epistemologies. And that to me is very profound and very powerful, that the fact is that we're coming into this with our own worldview intact and the stories that we inherently know and understand and retell over again connects us, as the land does, connects us to our ancestors and to those who came before us, which is very interesting because it was very similar to what Nasser was talking about earlier. So storytellers reference the tribal aesthetic, and modern writers tapping into a traditional story are referencing, again, ages of experience. We said that already. Indigenous knowledges or ways of learning and knowing are replicated in our traditional stories over and over and over again, in performance, in practice, and now in theory. So it's almost like we're doing this backwards. We're coming up with in ceremonial performativity. We're coming up in new plays, in new stories, in new songs, replicating what has happened already in the past. In Native epistemologies and in Native realities, the practice comes first before the theory. So then we like to try to figure out and theorize the practice and figure out how that works. So the indigenous cultural aesthetic follows logical assumptions. And in studying national literatures, one must look at the culture or the cultures from which these literatures arise. Cultural touchstones, for example, are imperative in understanding great canonical works of Western literature. So do theater critics and scholars then assume knowledge of great canonical works? And the assumption is that the Western epistemology, the non-native, non-indigenous epistemology, is given in this context, but to study native literatures using a non-native aesthetic makes no sense in examining when you look at the works of indigenous peoples. So coming at it from a Western frame of mind, and which is the anthropological issue and the anthropological problem that we've had as indigenous peoples, our stories, songs, ceremonies are recorded and interpreted through a non-Western lens. And it's almost like what the Maori scholar Linda Tuhivai Smith argues in her decolonizing practices in terms of decolonizing research. How do you bring indigeneity back into the research and step away from the Western model, which has always been to stand back and observe through a very Western colonial way of thinking. And again, Linda Tuhivai Smith argues that when we apply that Western aesthetic to indigenous practice, that's practicing colonialism all over again. And that must be acknowledged and it must be addressed if scholars are to decolonize the study of Native peoples and bring cultural context into the study of Native cultures. Okay, and so then there's a whole bunch that I'm going to skip over, and then I just have to find it because I had it all together. I wanted to talk about then moving into the concept and talk about sovereignty in the concept of survivance, and what does the concept of survivance through sovereignty, and what does sovereignty mean to Indigenous peoples? And we've been asking ourselves these questions for many, many, many years. What does it mean to be a sovereign nation? What does it mean to be, to have that nation to nation relationship with the federal government that we have? So native sovereignty is a concept that has been taken up by tribes in this modern era of self-determination. And the difficulty in achieving sovereignty, argued by Taikaki Alfred, who was a Mohawk scholar, he suggests that Native communities and tribes and nations are rooted not only in our traditional teachings, social structures, and cultural relations, but in the imposed structural elements forced upon us by the state through colonial practices. Sovereignty, as conceived of and practiced by tribes and the federal government, is a concept that will never be fully realized by Native nations within US boundaries, because the concept of sovereignty is a Western concept. And so when Indigenous peoples try to explain and talk about sovereignty, they're talking about a Western European American concept of sovereignty. But what does sovereignty mean to Indigenous peoples? The existing frameworks of sovereignty are not traditionally Native concepts, as I just said, and there is no way that the federal government is ever going to give complete political control back to the tribes. In that sense, native sovereignty, those two words together, is an elusive concept and an oxymoron. The Chickasaw scholar Amanda Cobb Leatham, who is at the University of Oklahoma, has argued that tribal sovereignty remains contingent upon the uneven power dynamic between Native nations and the United States federal government. The recognition and exercise of tribal sovereignty is complicated by the power imbalance between the United States and Native nations, Cobb argues. The American nation state is so powerful, so hegemonic, that its cloak of sovereignty becomes almost invisible. Cobb further illustrates her point, referring to a question that was asked of George W. Bush, the son, when he was questioned as to what is the definition of sovereignty. And it was amazing because he kind of had this strange look on his face, and he said sovereignty is sovereignty. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Okay, thank you, President Bush. I think we got this now. We don't need you to explain what it is. He later described the concept of sovereignty as a gift. And that is how, and how is that gift being given by the United States, not only to indigenous nations, but around the world? So if that whole concept of gift giving, I'm giving you something which is your inherent right. How can, which shows further that uneven power dynamic. Cobb used this rhetorical example to further argue that the concept is deeply embedded in that power dynamic, as well as in developing nations in the global theater. Tribal sovereignty is defined by the American Indian Policy Center as follows. Sovereignty is an internationally recognized concept. American Indian tribal powers originate with the history of tribes managing their own affairs, and case law has established that tribes reserve the rights that they have never given away. So we have never given away our sovereignty. It was taken from us. Given this definition, it would seem that Native nations are guaranteed sovereignty through the US Constitution and through federal Indian case law decided by United States federal courts. Tribes argue that they are indeed sovereign powers. A case in point is the Cherokee Nation's disenrollment of Cherokee freedmen citizens, which they have now given citizenship back to the freedmen because they lost the case in the Supreme Court. Many tribes rely on gaming revenue as a method of economic self-sufficiency, yet gaming is strictly over-regulated, some would argue, by government compacts that the tribes were forced into negotiating with state governments that allow certain types of gaming on tribal lands. Now, if nations were truly sovereign, using the federal government's definition of sovereignty, then tribes would not have to negotiate these compacts as mandated by the federal government. Certainly, we could argue that the United States, as evidenced by the Marshall Trilogy as a foundation for Indian law in the United States, never recognized the sovereign powers of Native nations within its boundaries. Lenape scholar Joanne Barker argues in Sovereignty Matters that the federal government did acknowledge the sovereignty of Native nations in the formative years of American Indian legal policy through the treaty-making process inherited by the colonizing powers of Europe. Yet the fact remains, Barker writes, that indigenous peoples were recognized by England, France, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States as constituting nations that possessed rights to sovereignty. And in the Chief Justice John Marshall argued that Native sovereignty does not exist due to the doctrine of discovery, and that all tribes are, quote, domestic dependent nations, unquote, of the federal government. And the relationship is similar to that of a ward with his guardian. So I always used to think of, okay, so Batman and Robin, how the ward and his guardian. So Bruce Wayne was Dick Grayson's guardian, and Dick Grayson was Bruce Wayne's ward. So that's what I always think of when I think of a ward to his guardian. I always think of Batman. So it's almost like the indigenous people are Robin, and Batman is the federal government, which kind of scares me a little bit. Joanne Barker goes on to historicize the modern understanding of Native sovereignty as it exists since the end of World War II, in which tribes began to articulate the concept through social movement, cultural production, and political change. And then I go in and I talk a little bit here, and I know that we're running short on time. But then I go in and talk a little bit about an example of that. So and the argument that I used is from the Pueblo narrative, Laguna Pueblo narratives, as recorded by Franz Boas, a very famous anthropologist. And he recorded the tribal narratives, but how he interpreted them was he interpreted them again through that Western lens and through a very Christianized example. So the creator, who was originally a female, now becomes male in the Boas transcripts and the Boas transcriptions. Leslie Marmon Silko, in Storyteller, who I mentioned earlier, reclaims tribal yellow woman narratives and rewriting those narratives as contemporary stories. In her contemporary yellow woman stories, of all of the traditional elements of the story are there, yet the characters are recast as modern Lagunas and Navajos living in a very modern world. These narratives are of survivance that connect the tribal reality of now to the tribal reality of the non-imagined past, as well as the tribal reality of the future. Modern writers such as Gunallan and Silko, and by the way, they were cousins, they did know each other very well, are taking traditional narratives and making them in a world that speaks to us not only of today, but what has been gone from the tribal past. There's sovereignty in the story, the ability to decolonize the tribal heart and mind, as Linda Tuhiwai-Smith and Gerald Taikaki Alfred both argued, is present in the work of Indigenous writers. So I talk a little bit about how we are able to reconnect to the landscape of stories and reconnect back through them. And then to talk about, and this is the last part, performativity in tribalography and the peoplehood matrix. Performativity, as defined by the English linguistic philosopher John L. Austin, is the action of saying creates the action of doing. And I talked a little bit about this when I was with you all last time a couple weeks ago. And the example that Austin uses is when in a marriage ceremony, the officiant says to the couple, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," or "I now pronounce you husband and husband, wife and wife, spouses, etc." Once the utterance has been spoken, "I now pronounce you married," you are now married based on the utterance that I give you. And so once it's been spoken, the words create the action. Hene Gigama, the Kiowa playwright, director, and scholar at UCLA, argues the concept of Indigenous performativity is the same as ceremonial performativity. In his book, Ceremony, Spirituality, and Native American Performance, Gigama asserts that Indigenous dramatists, playwrights, dramaturgs, and performers need to immerse themselves in contemporary and traditional forms of ceremony. For example, to participate in and observe contemporary ceremonies like powwows, and participate in traditional ceremonies of their own tribal nations. In both his plays and scholarship, Gigama inserts a sense of ceremony in the structure of his work, a sense of the oral and the translations, especially in his play, 49. 49 is the story of a group of young people who come to participate in a powwow and find themselves transformed in ways that they do not expect, or they did not expect. Cindy Alvitre and I have argued in an essay titled Performing Nation, Performing Identity, that as Native peoples, the performance of our identity is innately connected to our stories, songs, poems, and to the landscape in which we inhabit that informs our being as well as our doing. It is through our ceremonies, our songs, our words, that our rituals are reenacted in daily life. We speak our creation and connection to each other and to the landscape, and our actions, our dances, our artistic expressions reify the core of who we are as Indigenous peoples. Leanne Howe has she has talked specifically about ceremonial performativity in the concept of embodied tribalography that I talked about a little bit earlier. Howe's original essay on tribalography connects culture to land through language. She furthers her argument on tribalography to include the oral tradition, placing in specific conversation with the Choctaw landscape of Mississippi, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. By expanding the call and response tradition of Choctaw and other Southeastern ceremonial complex Indigenous people, how she instinctively asks how these songs are sung and how they are sung at specific sites in the Choctaw cosmos. And this is a quote from Leanne, and I'll finish up with talking a little bit more about embodied tribalography. Quote, I've long wondered what kinds of call and response songs were sung at southeastern mound sites, either in the morning, evening, or both. We can attend stomp dances, green corn ceremonies. These are our ceremonies of the southeastern indigenous peoples of the United States. And all night songs to hear shared southeastern morning and evening songs. But what of the specific tribal songs sung at specific sites? So she's talking about, again, that embodied connection to the landscape. With this in mind, the phrase Isa halali hatoko iksa ilak ish shki, because you were holding on to me, I am not dead yet. That is what the translation of those Choctaw words. It seems an expressive artifact lying dormant where it was buried inside of a Christian hymn. So because you are holding on to me, I am not dead yet. Because the community is holding on, because the ceremony is holding on, the community has not died. She connects these songs and stories, which she calls Choctaw oratory, to the specific sites in which they are performed. The ancient mounds in which the stickball or kabucha were performed historically, and the contemporary venues where we play kabucha today, ceremonial grounds, softballs, soccer fields, contemporary tribal complexes. She's talking about those specific connections that draw us all together. She's asking, utilizing an interdisciplinary approach to contemporary and oral traditions, how Choctaws embody cultural practice that connects us to the oral tradition, the rhetorical practices of Choctaws, to the lands from which we emerged, the mound sites in Mississippi and Louisiana, to the lands some of us now inhabit in Oklahoma. So I want to finish this evening, this conversation with, again, making those connections that we had talked about. So I had wanted to further talk about survivance and sovereignty and the connection to our landscape and the importance of language. And that's why I felt, when Nasser was presenting earlier on linguistic genealogy, really, to me, that was very fascinating because for us, indigenous peoples that are now in the United States, the landscape, the stories, the song, the language is what connects us as peoples. And because we are learning to practice sovereignty within the modern context of that word, and what does it mean for us as indigenous peoples to go back into our histories and to go back into our epistemologies and our understandings of the world in which we inhabit, to explain how we survive into the next 7 generations from now. So I want to finish there and hand it over back to Jerome and Vivian, and hopefully we can have time for question and answer, and we can engage in some of these concepts.
All right, thank you so much, Carolyn Dunn, and thank you as well to Nasser Sharif for the amount of content you put out for the community tonight. I'm gonna try and spotlight myself, and it's not working, but that's okay. Technology will love me one day. So we do have a little bit of time. Thank you, Vivian. We do have a little bit of time for some question and answer. So let me just pull up a couple of things. All right, so what are the questions that we wanted to ask? And we like to ask this every time because answers can change. What's one way that the youth can get involved in both of your work? What's one way you would like us to really continue spreading the word about genealogy of language and linguistics, and just pretty much everything you've spoken on today? My brain's not. The gears are a little rusty right now, but what's one way that you can get involved and learn more?
I would definitely say intergenerational practice, meaning you hang out with your grandparents, you hang out with your great aunts, hang out with your great uncles, the people, your elders, hang out with them and talk to them, listen to their stories. How do their stories enhance your own stories? One of the workshops that I do with youth is about telling a story of your grandparents' lives. and how to tell that story in a modern context. And so that's a lot of, when I do trainings with youth on performativity and storytelling, I do a lot of work with them on, bringing in a traditional story from where you come from, visit with the elders, listen to what they say, ask them questions, learn as many words as you can in your language, and learn about your history from where you have emerged. So that's a wonderful way for youth to get involved, for youth also to get involved in theater and to get involved in the performance of the work that we do. And so we have, we've worked with our youth in many ways in terms of getting them to understand that that it's important to spend the time intergenerationally with our elders and to learn from them. And unfortunately Western society doesn't see that as important. We have a different relationship with our elders than Western society does, and we need to continue to cultivate those relationships. I'll be quiet and let Nasser speak.
Thank you, Carolyn. And Nasser, did you have anything you wanted to add to that on how the youth can get involved and learn more? Oh, we can't hear you.
Yes.
There we go.
What's the question?
The question is, how can the youth get more involved and learn and dive deeper into the work that you've presented for us today?
Okay, there are a lot of things, For starter, try to know your immediate family, the story in your clan. If you are, for example, if you are in Ilocano or something like that, you have to ask old people, especially octogenarian people. Uh, for instance, I just mentioned Ilocos. There is a datu who from our place who always goes to Ilocos during the 17th century. The name is Dato Arayes, and the former what's this surgeon at arms of the Senate just told me that about these people, and I was able to find it in the genealogy, of course. The reason that we wanted to know the story of our something starting from our barrio or from our pueblo or our town is that um, there is a trend now in history what they call prosopography. This one is you collect all these diaries and everything is and to trying to make sense out of it. Now this is one way that the population can contribute to the history by compiling this. Uh, you know, um, in today's technology, the internet technology, and there is what they call data mining or text mining. Data mining is a technique which has been derived from the commercial sector. We call it the data mining. Like for instance, when you use a Microsoft White Plains software, the databasing computer, you are using data mining, and this is the computer has a very fast way of organizing this diverse disparate data. So this is the way that people can contribute. Number two is that people should also be trying to in the case of the Philippines, you should not only be interested in the history of your country. In those days, there was no such thing as Philippine, Indonesia, Malaysia, everything. There is no border. That's why, look, in my presentation, I just presented an event which actually started from Johor and then it went to Borneo, and then it went to the Philippines and back to Johor. In other words, when you think about the history, you think about a larger chunk, more. You do not confine yourself with just a province or something like that. In my case, in my genealogy, for instance, I don't just compile genealogies on the Maranao or the Maguindanao or the Sulu. I have all that, but I also compile genealogies of the Manubos and the even the Visayas and of course Luzon. And beyond that, also I also compile genealogies from Maloco, from Ternate, from Tidori, from Jakarta, from Johor, from Banjarmasin, from Sabah, from Tampaso, Sarawak, etc., etc. In other words, history has no borders. Although you might want to confine your your narrative to a certain sector, that's the focus only. But to be able to get the gist of things, you have to laid out a wider, cast a wider net. So that is this is the this is what I have been pointing out in the history of the Philippines. We are so confined. In fact, a lot of people and even professor, they wanted to start the Philippine history in 1781. That's the Katipunan Revolution. What then is there? Rizal is even ordered the Katipunan Revolution. And what happened between the Katipunan Revolution and today, that could not be Philippine history. That's not just Philippine history. We have to dig way, way, way back, much as we can. And for this, as Caroline has mentioned, it is actually indigenous stories, indigenous songs, folklore that actually give uh, that give motion to all the archaeological finds that we make, because without this there's no way to interpret it. We can only interpret it with the literature of a certain nation, for instance the Indians. So I've been emphasizing this in my, in many of my presentation. These are the things that I am present. Now I have collected about from 2015. Actually, I was collecting salsilas and genealogical references way back in 2020. I have a reference of over 800 salsilas now. And with my own fingers, over the years, I have keyed in about how do you say, let me check. I have now 100, 108,000 interests, an output of more than 25,000 individuals. And many of these people live from 1400 up to the 19th century. Now, this one is a source of history. This is a source of history. I have already demonstrated to you the source of history that we can come up from the Laguna Copper Plate and even from the Golden Tara from Butuan. I have already demonstrated in my presentation, which a traditional history. Right now, I think there is, let me inject this one, because there is a question about how are we affected by the internet in the study of history? A lot, you know. I could not do research now without the internet, but it doesn't mean that I am taking from the internet. You have to do some field works also, because this is the original import. The way you can relate your field work and the original research that you do with what we have so far discovered is you can synthesize it and make it your history. You can write a book on that. You can write articles on that. And you might be able to discover a lot of things which traditional historians, people who are library bound, have not discovered. You know, you're gonna just research through libraries and through the internet, etc. Especially Wikipedia, there are a lot of mistakes there, mind you. I'll tell you that. There are a lot of mistakes, and I have been pointing out every now and then, especially in my Facebook postings. By the way, I have my Facebook postings. And for instance, when I wrote Dr. Lucy Rizal embracing the Salsila way back, I think 2 years ago with the Manila Times. Deported, it's not a news, but deported on the front page. And because it's a little bit long, deported day one and day two. I think that was Friday and Saturday. You can Google it. You can Google my name, Manila Times. I have also some other writings, etc. With this, even if you are involved in history, you have to do some uh, folklore and Indian literature. In my case, I do fiction writing. I write fiction also, besides history. Thank you very much.
I guess
Oh, go ahead, Pochi. You're muted. Pochi, we can't hear you.
now you
there-
can hear me. I think we have to bring back this
Oh,
Nasser and Carolyn again.
use.
You can hear me?
There's an echo. There's some feedback. Use Tito Noni's microphone, and I'll mute your
Can you hear me now?
one. That's
Hear me.
better. Yes.
All right. There are two gadgets in this room, so I think we really have to schedule again and bring back both Nasser and Carolyn in this platform, because this is what we need right now, and it's very absent. How many Native American studies we have in the universities. When I ask some of the people around, they don't even know why we do land acknowledgement. So anyhow, and it's very important that Nasser is doing this, because
She's a Queens, New York. So,
there is that absence of written literature. There's so much of oral tradition among the Maranao or the Moro people that we really have to capture it. So much so that we will not be erased the way we are being erased or taken over by the Western paradigm.
Right.
So we really want to keep you. It's just 8:45, and we're gonna reschedule. I mean, we're gonna bring you back, and hopefully you will be there for us. And because there's so much thirst and hunger for all those knowledge that you have with you, and hopefully we can really influence the young people to embrace the whole process of this is a big decolonization action that we are doing, and we can only act that decolonization if we will dedicate our life working on this, not really getting too much in the whole consumerism of USA. And remember, USA is in the Philippines. And I'm really, I would like to discuss next time the sovereignty, like the blessing. I will give you your independence, but we fought our independence.
I'm handing it over to you. I am giving you, Potri, your independence.
And that means that you have control on me already,
Exactly.
So I think that's the next topic we're gonna do. We'll continue with the genealogy because that is very empowering. Oh, the professor
yeah,
has
no,
a
the question. It was good.
We have time. All
Yeah.
right, we'll give 2 minutes.
It's the last. Where do you draw the line between? I'm concerned about representation of indigenous traditional narratives, indigenous narratives. Now, because one problem which we have encountered at some point, sometimes would be the way the uninformed would perform some of the traditional dances, for instance, the tibuli and all of that. And we know that in theater, the literary writing and theater is really a freer than historical writing. You're given a lot of freedom to express yourself. That's why you move from, especially in modern times when you have from formalism to deconstruction, or and so there is that. But anyway, it's also a very complicated.
Right. And I think honey, we could do like
When you write the poem, or
yeah, I mean,
you write the play.
do a whole session on, like you were saying, kind of how we view traditional representation, and how we deal with, like you were saying, modernism, deconstructionism, because and I think that question is, and then I've done some work on that too, where you talk about indigenous aesthetics as opposed to Western aesthetics, and how do you, and I think we kind of talked about this when I was on last time. We talked
I'm
about,
sorry to butt in, but this is very precious, and this is one whole lot of a session, maybe 3 hours, because we are so much facing this. Actually, I just attended a conference yesterday, and that's also one of those questions that we are really struggling as indigenous people. So it's 8:49, and you would like to say we love you so much, and you would like to bring you back, and this is all that we can say. Thank you, shukran, and salamu alaikum. In Mohawk, it says nyawi goa and sego. In Maranao, well, Muslims, so we say assalamu alaikum and shukran. Please be healthy, keep safe always, because we need to continue what we're doing. And Professor Kianyo, we will answer your question later. Maybe you will be part of the conversation as a literature professor yourself. Yes. And Jerome, thank you very much.
Right. So let me just share my screen real quickly for some closing announcements.
Can you have a photograph?
I don't know how Vivian does that on here.
That's Vivian's
sorry.
job.
She's a master of all that. I will eventually learn how to do that. But just some quick closing announcement, folks. Is my microphone on? Yes. Okay, so for ongoing typhoon relief, because the Philippines was recently slammed with multiple typhoons, you can go to this link, sponsored by NAVCON USA, or the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns. We're part of NAVCON Northeast chapter. We also are rearing up for another Love for Marawi campaign. And if you want to sign up for updates, you can go to the tiny URL. And then we have Nasser Sharif's website, which is onmaranao.blogspot.com. Apologies, Carolyn, I was not able to get your website from the last time on here. But I know you have a couple of books out if you want to speak briefly about those.
Oh, yes. Well, I have three books of poetry. One published in 2001 originally, 2013 and 2017. And so I have those books available. Also, I've done, and we can post links on the page if people are interested.
Yeah, sure. I can do that.
That would be fine. We could post titles and links. And then actually the one that came out in 2001, we're having an anniversary edition coming out next year. So I'm with new introduction, new artwork, and maybe some new poems. I'm very excited about it.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. And then as always, we have our weekendly, that's a new word now, I've decided. Dance classes Saturdays at 12 p.m. Eastern time and Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. If you're interested, feel free to visit the link tree or scan your QR code on the screen. And then that is the last of my slides for tonight. So once again, folks, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for sticking with us through this all. And we hope that you continue to stay safe, and please wear your mask, please. Stay safe out there. And then I think, Pochi, we should do our salutation, correct?
We have our salutation. This is a Kinding Sindaw salutation. In honor of our ancestors who created and transmitted this tradition to us, with open hearts, we'd like to take them in mind, body, and soul. And with humility, we bow as we use it to empower us as we walk our path. Wow!
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, folks.